Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers Review the Week. I'm Matthew Moore. In the next 30 minutes, our talks with the Taliban, the only way to bring peace to Afghanistan. The Taliban's leader was killed in an American drone strike last week, but his replacement threatens to be just as dangerous. France is brought to its knees by angry workers. Thousands walk off the job in protest at proposed labour reforms. We ask whether France's unions hold the power. And peace groups praise an historic visit to Hiroshima by President Obama. But what's been the reaction in Japan? We hear from survivors of the world's first nuclear attack. Now, for the second time in under a year, the Afghan Taliban have appointed a new leader. His name isn't overly familiar, but his ideology certainly is. Hibatullah Akhundzada has taken control of a group barely weakened by 15 years of war, which still has the money, the men, and the ability to kill en masse. Now, the Taliban controls more territory than at any time during the war, which began in 2001. So while many Afghans have been celebrating the death of former leader Mullah Akhtar Mansour, also in an American drone strike, the militant group remains a powerful force. Francis Collings reports.
It was a strike that was as quick as it was unexpected. When the Afghan Taliban leader, Mullah Akhtar Mansour, was obliterated by an American drone, he was near the town of Ahmed Wal. He was in Pakistan, but near to the Afghan border, an area thought to be off limits for US drones. But in swiftly appointing Hibatullah Akhundzada as the new Afghan Taliban leader, the killing may not have caused the turmoil in the ranks that the Americans had hoped for. It does nothing, however, for US-Pakistan relations.
This drone strike was a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. We have conveyed our serious concern to the United States on this issue.
Meaning students in the Pashtun language, the Taliban began under Mullah Omar in the mid-1990s. Afghanistan had fallen into chaos after the Soviet withdrawal in 1989. Various Mujahideen factions fought for control. The Taliban began with less than 50 armed men from religious schools in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Spreading from Kandahar, they eventually ruled 90% of the country, until the US-led coalition removed them from power in 2001. In the years since, like any organization, the Taliban has had power struggles and disharmony in the ranks. A year ago, it emerged that the founder, Mullah Omar, had been dead for 2 years, that Mullah Mansour and others had been issuing decrees in his name while hiding news of his death. Mansour worked hard to head off challengers to his ascent. The Afghan Taliban has made strong battlefield gains against government forces in recent months, driving back troops from key positions and launching a string of bombings in Kabul. As a new leader was announced last week, they claimed responsibility for a suicide bombing in the capital that killed 11 people. There was an understanding that a new consensus leader was needed swiftly to quickly re-establish harmony. Mansour himself had refused to participate in the peace process initiated by the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani that included Pakistan, the United States and China. Analysts suggest the change in leadership would do little to shift the group's policy.
The leader dead is a very important point for Taliban. Hardliner Taliban. This Taliban will be stronger inside the Taliban.
But is the decapitation of the Taliban leader likely to improve Afghanistan's security problems? Or could it create more difficulties than it actually solves? Francis Collings, The Newsmakers.
Well, for more on whether compromise or combat with the Taliban is the best path to peace in Afghanistan, we spoke to Michael Semple. He's a visiting professor at Queen's University's Institute for the Study of Conflict, Transformation and Social Justice. We also spoke to Moeed Pirzada in Islamabad. He's the editor of Strategic Affairs at Dunya News Network.
People, the government, the people in the military failed to really understand that why the US administration took the decision to eliminating Mullah Mansour Akhtar, who was continuously engaged with the Western institution and with the Chinese throughout the past 2 years. Even when Mullah Omar was dead, he was engaging the United States in the name of Mullah Omar. There was a process called Murray process in which the Haqqanis also participated. Both United States and Chinese were actually the observers in July of 2015. And the Taliban and the Haqqanis had offered that Kabul and all the surrounding areas of Kabul can be declared as conflict-free zone in the first step. But then the NDS, the Afghan intelligence, brought out the news that Mullah Omar is dead, and the whole process of negotiation was disrupted. Again, the Pakistanis and Chinese were able to persuade the Afghan Taliban to negotiation table. This was the 5th round that took place, and the reason the negotiations were not going forward was because Taliban had 6 conditions, and 4 of those conditions were very lenient, like accepting the Qatar office, taking the travel ban from the Taliban leadership, stopping calling them as terrorists, and freeing some of the prisoners from Guantanamo Bay. But none of the conditions, 2 of the conditions are strict, like enforcement of Sharia and the exit of the US forces, but those were not serious. United States kept on saying that Taliban should come to the negotiation table without accepting any condition.
Killing senior militants is not sufficient to solve the problem. It's not adequate. Whether you say, yeah, you have to do it sometimes or not, that's another issue. It has some negative effects, some positive, but it certainly does not deliver peace and security. So if anything, it can only be part of a strategy. It's not adequate. It certainly cannot substitute for an effective political strategy. And yes, I believe there is a prospect for talks with the Taliban, but I think it's important to do a careful and fact-based evaluation of the experience of the past year. Whoever you want to hold responsible for it, I think that attempts over the past year to get negotiations going have not succeeded. So if there will be a continuing political process, they'll have to be doing things differently.
It's becoming an all too familiar sight in France. This week, rail workers and Paris metro staff became the latest to walk off the job in protest at proposed labour reforms, which would make it easier for firms to hire and fire. Oil refineries, power plants, transport services have all been disrupted recently by industrial action. Now, with just days to go until France hosts the Euro 2016 football tournament, the government has come under intense pressure to reach some sort of agreement. Duncan Crawford has more.
For the protesters, it's a fight for French values and their rights, to protect the country's labour laws that they view as under attack. Weeks of strikes have disrupted much of the country. Many unions are opposed to government moves to support businesses by making it easier to hire and fire workers.
Je tiendrai bon parce que je pense que c'est une bonne réforme et que nous devons aller jusqu'à son adoption.
Quand il y a autant de contestations, quand il y a autant de rejets d'un projet de loi, il faut le retirer et recommencer à zéro pour rediscuter.
France has long had a reputation as a nation of strikers, and many analysts argue that over the years, that reputation has cost the country business and foreign investment. With tensions still high and the Euro 2016 football tournament due to kick off, will the government stick to the reforms at the risk of more social unrest? As the debate around France's labour laws has intensified, so too have the levels of anger and violence. The law would relax the rules around the country's 35-hour work week, make it easier to fire workers and weaken the power of the unions. The aim, the government says, is to make the labour market more flexible and get more people into work after a decade of near 10% unemployment. But in recent weeks, union workers have blocked oil refineries and nuclear power stations, leading to fuel shortages and long queues at the pumps. The government's had to dip into the country's strategic oil reserves to make up for the shortages. The CGT union is at the forefront of the protests. Rooted in France's Communist Party, it says the labour changes will harm employees' rights. And more strikes are planned this week and in June. One poll suggests almost 2/3 of the public back the protests. As for François Hollande, the strikes couldn't have come at a worse time. His approval ratings are already the worst of any post-war French leader, and his hopes for re-election in 2017 are taking another blow.
Elle va passer.
Vous ne céderez pas.
Pourquoi? Parce que elle a été discutée, elle a été concertée, elle a été corrigée, elle a été amendée.
As France prepares to host Euro 2016, it could face a summer of discontent. The unions are betting the government will back down to avoid embarrassment. But the government's banking on public opinion turning against the protesters. Duncan Crawford, The Newsmakers.
Well, for more on whether the trade unions are right to strike, we spoke to Didier Ott. He's a spokesman for the Force Ouvrière, one of the unions backing the walkouts. We also spoke to Diego Zuluaga. He's a financial services research fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs. We asked them if the proposed labour reforms would make it easier for businesses to employ more people.
There is already a lot of flexibility in the labour market because most of the new jobs are hired under short-term contracts. It's not zero-hour contracts like in Great Britain.
Well, precisely,
but short-term
because hiring on a long-term contract is too expensive.
So, in fact, there is a lot of flexibility already. And I don't think if you increase that flexibility, it will make good for the economy because you will have lower rates, lower pay, lower situation for the workers, and of course they will not buy as much as they could have done with a better pay. When you want to rent a house and when you want to buy a house, what ask the bankers? They ask, what is your job? If you say I have short-term contracts, you can have a loan, you can have a good flat or good apartment. So obviously it's against the economic, it's against the situation of the workers, and it's against the population in general.
Okay. So Diego, there's very little collateral. No. You can't really hedge it against assets or a stable job. It makes life more difficult for you on short-term contracts. Diego?
No, the problem in France is that we have a two-tier labour market. We have a group of insiders, people who are heavily protected, and that may well benefit them, but it comes directly at the expense of a group of workers, often the most underprivileged, who are not able to access the labour market in a proper way. And it is intimately related to minority groups and people who are stuck in certain parts of town where they are not able to reach economic opportunities. Those are the same people that are sidelined by current labour market regulations. As to the fact that it's related to economic prosperity, well, I would doubt it. If you look around Europe, the countries that have flexible labour markets, Nordic countries, including Denmark or the UK, they have thriving employment and very high rates of occupation and very low rates of unemployment, whereas the countries that have rigid labour laws,
but could you say
that France is trying to reform right now, such as Spain and Italy and so on, they tend to
finish his point.
high
Did you let him finish his
sentence?
The rate of poverty in those countries, and in fact the workers, poor workers, are increasing in those countries where flexibility is reigning. And in fact, in France, of course, nearly 90% of the workers are protected
much
by
higher rates of growth,
national convention,
much higher rates of employment, and in general are much better off. And they're much better at making the poor improve their condition. The trouble in France, the trouble in France is that you have no social mobility right now.
They are not healthier. And in fact, I think you are confusing the rate of employment and the rate of poverty. And the rate of poverty is increasing, in fact.
7 decades ago, the world's first nuclear bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. The massive ball of fire and radiation killed 140,000 people and destroyed almost every building in its path. Such horror altered history and created so much fear that after a second bomb on Nagasaki, the world has questioned the morality of nukes as weapons of war ever since. The US President Barack Obama, on a historic visit to Hiroshima last week, spoke of his desire to reduce nuclear stockpiles, while offering his respects to the victims of the 1945 bombing. But despite his words of reconciliation and remembrance, Obama has himself failed to reach the targets he set himself early in his presidency. Sandra Gathmann has more from Hiroshima, where she went to meet survivors.
We stand here in the middle of this city and force ourselves to imagine the moment the bomb fell. On a bright, cloudless morning, death fell from the sky and the world was changed.
ずっと並んでて前の人が綺麗綺麗って言うから私もちょっとなんか綺麗なのかねと思って振り返ってみた途端に原爆がバッと光ってからすごい光であって。
We come to ponder a terrible force unleashed in a not so distant past.
もうとにかく皆に焼けてだらけ、我々のところはすでに死んだのはたくさんある。もう何百何千で死ぬ。私は何で生きたかわからんですけどね、そういうところでね、まあ女学生、女の子ですかね、こう髪の右の目玉がポローと出たの。
手の皮が止まって垂れ下がってるんですよ。でこれを下に下ろすと痛いからみんなこうしてね、でお化けの行列のようにゾロゾロゾロゾロ。
Mere words cannot give voice to such suffering. But we have a shared responsibility to look directly into the eye of history and ask what we must do differently to curb such suffering again.
大サービス、大サービス、はい。
It wasn't an apology, but Miyako didn't need one. She's buried the pain from the horrors of that day, a day she survived because she stayed home from work with a stomachache.
オバマさんに謝罪をしてもらうことよりも廃絶を言っていただきたいと。地雷とか毒ガス、そういうものは国際法で禁止されてるのに、なぜこれをね禁止できないのかいうのがもっともっと声を大きくしていかない。
これは8月6日の11時頃だから、8月6日にね人が写ってるのはね5枚しかない。私がここへ写っとるから、これが死んどったらダメだからね、もうまだ生きてるこれ。
81-year-old Sunal Tsuboi has made it his life's work to share his story. He was badly burned in the blast and suffers from cancer caused by the radiation. He had high hopes that Obama would be the one to abolish nuclear weapons.
大川さんがね、我々が続婚頑張っていて応援するのはプラハプラハ。
Today, I state clearly and with conviction America's commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons.
After hearing that speech, he wrote to Obama asking him to come to Hiroshima. 7 years later, he did. But not everyone extended a warm welcome to the leader of the country which spends the most on its nuclear arsenal.
For the people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they would like this trip to be about nuclear weapons and about arms reduction, but it's really not about those things in any way. Obama has committed the United States to rely on and actually increase its reliance on nuclear weapons for 30 years. He's committed $1 trillion of U.S. spending to modernize U.S. nuclear weaponry.
The cenotaph in the center of Hiroshima's Peace Park reads, "Rest in peace, for mistakes shall never be repeated." And President Obama stood here while paying his respects. But somewhere in the vicinity, a U.S. military aide had the presidential emergency satchel at the ready, a briefcase containing the codes to launch more than 900 nuclear warheads with more than 20,000 times the power of the bomb that hit Hiroshima. Today's Hiroshima is a city of nearly 1.5 million people. It's been rebuilt entirely. So has Japan's perception of America. It's a modern city with a symbolic mission: to never forget. Inside the Peace Museum, a watch, disabled in the blast, still tells the time the bomb hit. Tattered clothes remind visitors of the bomb's destructive power. The surrounding park has been built in an open field created by the nuclear blast, which killed more than 140,000 people, mostly women and children. Hiroshima's children are all too aware of their city's past, especially at Honkawa Elementary School, which was destroyed in the bombing and where peace studies are part of the curriculum.
被爆者の方もどんどん高齢化しますし、亡くなられる方も多いですので、やはり爆心地に一番近い小学校として平和を発信していくというのは本校の大事な使命。
But the story is not told in its entirety. The school library contains few books about the Second World War. No mention of Japanese atrocities in China and Korea. It's long been a criticism that Japan ignores its uncomfortable history. Now there's new cause for nerves. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is reinterpreting a constitutional ban on Japan having an army, a clause forced by the US after the war. Japan insists it's under threat. North Korea is testing nuclear missiles, and China is building military bases in disputed waters. With the US now focusing on Asia, a visit to Japan's deepest wound helped seal the alliance. But this was an important day for legacy, for outgoing President Barack Obama, and for the people of Hiroshima. Survivors felt the weight of history coming full circle. And Sunao Tsuboi got his wish, seizing the occasion to tell the president not to get lazy after retiring. It was especially emotional for Kimie. To see an American president stand before the scarred building where she used to work, where she was meant to be on the day of the bombing, but was running late.
自分たちが過ちを起こしたことをこれからは絶対に繰り返さないように、核兵器は廃絶するように世界に大統領がお参りしてくださったことで発信することができるんじゃなと思いました。こういう機会があって嬉しく思っています。この意義のある日に出会わせてもらって私は幸せだったねと思います。
Well, for more on Obama's Hiroshima visit, we spoke to Scott Harold. He's the Associate Director at RAND's Center for Asia-Pacific Policy. We also spoke to Eric Draitser. He's an independent geopolitical analyst and founder of StopImperialism.com. Now, we asked them both if Obama should have apologized for the 1945 bombing.
It is, in many ways, one of America's enduring and most shameful acts, the dropping of these atomic weapons, which many experts, including leading historians, now believe was not only utterly unnecessary, but was really a political move designed to spread fear to Moscow for the coming Cold War, rather than it was a strategic necessity. So obviously, an apology for that would have been important.
History is one of the most challenging issues in the Asia-Pacific. The challenges are, of course, not only with the United States or Japan, as you noted, Imran. They also deal with Russia and its Pacific legacies. They also deal with what happened in Korea, what's currently happening in North Korea, what is currently happening in China, and what has happened historically in China. I think for understandable reasons that you noted, Imran, the Japanese government was not eager to have this portrayed as an apology. And the U.S. government would not have come if it was, President Obama would not have gone if it was an apology. History is quite contentious in every country, and this was, I think, the most positive, forward-looking message that gets us all focused on the threat of nuclear weapons in the hands of states that are not showing themselves to be responsible, and highlights the fact that Russia, North Korea, China, Pakistan are all actively and aggressively modernizing their nuclear arsenals at a time when many of us believe that the world should be drawing down.
And that's a look at the Week in Review. In Monday's edition, we'll look at new attempts to revive the Middle East peace process and ask if a two-state solution is a realistic option for Israelis and Palestinians. For now, though, you've been watching the Newsmakers Review the Week. With me, Matthew Moore. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.